Hello, and welcome to Get Recc'd. I am your host, Dawn.
And I am your other host, Steven, of the Falgout family. Get Recc'd is our occasional podcast where every week Dawn recommends something to me and I recommend something to them. And then we talk about it in the following week.
Yes, and welcome to episode 57, our special video game episode. It's for the gamers, so I hope that they're all watching today. I know I have
Yeah.
I have a huge gamer audience, and Get Recc'd has really failed to capitalize on that. But today we're turning it around.
If you're not a pro gamer, this stream is not for you.
Yeah, step aside.
I have my G Fuel in one hand and my LED keyboard in the other.
Probably not the other thing if we're talking about we are, I will
my
say,
LGB keyboard.
we could be doing a bit of a better job. We could be streaming on Twitch to really capitalize on the gamer market, but honestly, I think YouTube gaming is really popping off, so we're hitting it. We're gonna be the ones.
Yeah, we were considering actually streaming to Facebook gaming, but we know where the pro gamers are.
YouTube gaming.
YouTube gaming.
And I think with that, we should begin capitalizing on that market by
hold on. Let me just smash back this G Fuel real quick.
Oh, sorry, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay, it's smashed.
Okay, cool. I think we should begin with what I recommended to you, Steven, last episode.
Yes, let's do it.
All right, so last time I recommended to Steven the 2010 indie platformer game Super Meat Boy, which I believe was originally released on Xbox Arcade, but it's now pretty much everywhere, and even gets released on newer consoles as well. And I will turn it over to Steven.
And I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but it was kind of a redesign sequel sort of a thing for originally a Flash game just called Meat Boy.
Mm-hmm.
And there's some allusions to that in the actual Super Meat Boy itself. But I think the thing about this game is, and we've talked about, what's interesting is I feel like throughout the course of this podcast, we talked about a lot of those early original Xbox Live arcade games, which were so impactful and really launched the indie scene to where it is today, which is just like, it's absolutely astronomical. Because to this point, getting a game on a console, especially as an indie developer, was honestly unheard of. And even in like 2008 to 2010, getting into that Xbox Live summer, like a summer of arcade or whatever they called it, where they kept showcasing all these indie platforms, even that was a gigantic burden for indie developers because the actual hosting costs were so high, but they were lower than they had ever been. Because to that point, to get a game through the traditional channels, you really had to go through a publisher. Now, publishers were more willing to make strides in actual creativity and actually put money towards smaller projects or mid-sized projects, but independent development was really honestly just kind of a function of maybe Steam, although even at that time Steam as a platform was not as large as it was, but primarily things like Newgrounds and Flash platforms where Meat Boy was developed and then ultimately Super Meat Boy. All of that is to say, you can definitely see why this was so influential. I mean, Super Meat Boy is just such a refinement of execution and design, and it is so clean and so straightforward and so much fun. And I think that's what is the most important thing of why I feel like Meat Boy became as popular as it was and then has then launched a whole bunch of indie games from it. It's just like, it took the concept of platforming, which was already so well established, boiled it down to its core basics, ramped up the difficulty, but made it all super replayable and super compact. And so Super Meat Boy is really something that's just very easy to pick up, to try a whole bunch of levels, die, repeat the process, and it's never burdensome. And although it can sometimes be frustrating, it is that level of frustrating where you want to climb that boundary and are fulfilled by climbing that boundary. Games from this point, I feel like, have tapped into that level of challenge, and games before it were very challenging, especially as you think of like some of the early platformers and going back to like the 80s and the early 90s. And you have things like then coming out of it, you have like Dark Souls and those sorts of experiences that are very similar. But Super Meat Boy is so refined in its execution that it's just so easy to play and so easy to recommend and so much fun.
And it's funny too, because like considering that the game is this hard, I do think it's actually a super accessible game because it's like it's not like there's a crazy learning curve. I mean, there's a high skill curve. I mean, like you have to get good at it. You know, you have to get good at the controls, but there's not a ton to learn. And the game, like any great platformer, teaches you everything you need to know about the controls in like the first two levels. Like by that point, you're already like, okay, I get it. And yeah, the game's hard, but it doesn't feel like it gatekeeps the player behind anything. Like, first of all, you don't have to beat every level. You can skip some if they're too challenging, and also the game doesn't waste any time if you die. It doesn't give you any time to be like, ah, hell, like this is like such an ordeal. It's just like you die and you're just back. You just respawn immediately. You just keep playing it over and over and over again, which makes it kind of similar actually to some of the stuff that I was saying about something like even Slay the Spire, which is like a totally different game, but it's similar in the sense that it feels like a super arcadey experience. Like despite it being difficult and despite it being hard to master, it's like it doesn't feel like much of a burden to just start playing it. And it's like I guess it's also helped by the fact that it's a 2D platformer, which is inherently really simple, but the move set is also just so robust. They do open it up a lot because there are other characters that you can play as, but it's an aspect of the game I often forget about because it's just so much fun to play as Meat Boy anyway. And when you're talking about Meat Boy, his move set is just, you know, run, jump, and wall jump, and that's it. That's everything that you do. A lot of wall jumping, and it's actually really clever when you think about how the levels are designed to make the focus wall jumping, because the levels tend to be super tight, super small. A lot of them are only like one screen large, and if they're any larger, it's usually only vertically or horizontally. So it's nothing crazy, and in order to make that work, they focus so much of the platforming on like navigating wall jumps between spaces with hazards in between, which I just think is really smart, and it's also super fun. And there are definitely like other 2D platformer games out there that are super wall jump focused. Like I've never played NES games, but I know like even like something like Ninja Gaiden was all about wall jumping, and it's an old thing. But I don't know that I am at least familiar with a game that is quite as based around that mechanic as this game is, because like that is the majority of the challenge in this game.
And you touched on the characters. I did want to touch on that too. But what's also so great about Meat Boy is that there's a lot of different side mechanics that you can choose to interact with or not. There's kind of a time attack mode, which that opens up a whole different range of playability. There's bandages hidden in a level, which unlock stuff, so you can try to find those as much as possible. There are hidden portals and those sorts of things, which open up whole new levels, which allow you to unlock new characters, which have their own play style, but all kind of still balanced within the worlds and the game's rules. And all of that is super fun to be able to interact with. Or if you want, you can just try to beat every level as quickly as possible, do them in the best time that you can, that sort of a thing. All of that is kind of available as options for you to be able to play through. And then the other thing is each of the worlds that you interact with, which have levels, and you go through the levels as you try to beat the game. There's like kind of a dark world variant, which is like an even harder variant of the pre-existing world. So once you learn a world's rules, which all of them are kind of the same, but like some worlds are more focused around saw blades and that sort of a thing, then you kind of play a dark world variant, which is even harder and opens up a whole new level of challenge that you can play and interact with.
And the Dark World stuff is super cool because this game does play very quickly. It's very snappy, and it encourages speed running. Like, even if you're not actually trying to put up a speed run world record or something, just to play for yourself, it encourages you to get better and play the levels faster. And you actually have to do that to unlock the Dark World. There is a time goal you have to reach and beat the level under in order to unlock the Dark World variant, which is the harder version. And it makes you think about playing the game as fast as possible as you play it. So it almost forces you not to waste time so that the game feels even quicker on the whole. And unlike a lot of platformers, there aren't a lot of challenges in this game that are based around waiting for things. That's a very common obstacle in a lot of platformers, is like getting the timing down of certain obstacles and things like that. But in this game, that's not that common. So there's not a lot of waiting around, and when you do actually start playing the Dark World levels, it gets even more insane, and especially towards the very end of the game and with the bonus world Dark World variants and stuff, it can get ridiculous. But that's what makes it cool, I think, because a lot of people will find this game really challenging just playing it the first time through on the light world variants. So to know that waiting behind that is something even harder, it really motivates you to actually give it a shot, because you're like, oh, that's got to be nuts. And I really like that this game almost forces you not to want to stop playing it. I think it does a super good job of keeping you linked to it until you finish it. Like, I could never see myself starting this game and not finishing it, because there's just so many things that are so fun to do and that the game motivates you to do, that I just is another reason why it's such a replayable thing.
And I did want to mention one thing, which is super smart. So you talked about the time attack variant and how you have to beat certain time challenges to unlock stuff. The ghost mechanic in this game is such a brilliant usage of a mechanic that at this point in time had already been frequently used in racing games. But by seeing like all the paths in which you died and being able to kind of trace, oh, okay, like you can kind of chart out some efficiencies as you're watching even your final path of success. That sort of stuff really enhances that time experience and pushes the speedrunning aspect of this game. And there are actually a lot of platformers that came after this that took that mechanic almost full blown. I'm thinking about certain games like, even honestly, even Mario took that mechanic. I think in Mario Maker, there's something very similar to that, where you can chart actually like paths of death and that sort of thing, which help for the speedrunning aspect of the game.
Yeah, it's also worth noting this game's presentation, which I think is just so good. It does look much like a Flash game. I wouldn't be surprised if it was made in Flash, or at least partially made in Flash, but I don't know. But it definitely looks like a Flash game, and it's got a really great visual flair, really great visual style, but it also has a lot of great humor in it. A lot of this game is built around making fun of previous platformer games, a lot of old school retro games, and making like nods and references to those. But then also it pays homage to the indie scene with like all of the extra characters being characters in other indie games. And I think depending on what console you play it on, or if you play it on PC or whatever, you get there are some different characters. Like, I think on Xbox they have Steve from Minecraft in it, but I never played it on Xbox. I'm pretty sure that's true though. So you can have something like it's got stuff from all over the indie scene. It's like paying tribute to all these things, and also just gaming history before it, which just makes it a lot of fun. It feels almost like it's a parody of something, which just adds a whole level of character to the game on top of how fun it already is.
And as a part of that homage, there are these retro worlds where you kind of go into like a 2D pixel art space, and some of them look like the old Game Boy and things like that, and those are really cool too.
Yeah, I guess in a way it is kind of nostalgia baity, but I think that it just gives the game a lot of charm. And Also, those worlds that do put you into like 8-bit or 16-bit looking areas, those worlds actually play differently as well. Like those are worlds that have 3 lives, and then if you lose your lives, you're dead, as opposed to the rest of the game where there are no lives, you just keep going infinitely, which is a nice change of pace. So there really is like, I mean, the game is paced super well as it is. Like playing from start to finish, the difficulty ramps up at a very reasonable rate. And if there are any levels that are like a little too difficult, a little too fast, you can always just skip them and come back to them later anyway. But playing this game all the way through it, I don't feel like the challenge is uneven. And that's really important because this game does get pretty insanely hard, especially when you're talking about the Dark World. It just does a really good job of getting you accustomed to everything so that it's not throwing anything too ridiculous in your face too soon. So, like, even though it is often considered, like a really hard game or whatever, I don't think it's super frustrating, and I also don't think it should put anybody off, because I don't think it's like absurd or trolly about it.
We should also mention the boss fights, which all the worlds have a boss fight, and I think pretty much every single one of those are just so well designed and really. A lot of times, platformers will not necessarily introduce new mechanics for a boss fight, but a boss fight will feel disconnected from what you're doing on every other level. But in Super Meat Boy, it's so well integrated. It's really just like running or platforming challenges that it's just a good highlight for kind of the end of the world going into a next world.
Yeah, I think if I have one main criticism with this game, it's the fourth world's boss, which is the only boss where they don't do this. In most of the game, the bosses, yeah, they're basically just like levels that a boss is also playing with you. In fact, one of them is literally a race against the boss through a level. But they all are set up so that you're using the same skills, and it just feels like all the other levels, but now it's a little bit more epic, because now there's like an enemy or something. However, in World 4, they have a boss which is all about dying and memorizing its attack patterns, and that's it. You can't beat it the first go around unless you are insanely lucky, because you have no idea what it's going to do. It doesn't telegraph its attacks super well, and you basically just have to rely on memorization, which is like the one part of this game that I don't think feels super fun. It feels frustrating and unnecessarily so, and it does feel a bit disconnected from everything else. Whereas all the other bosses, especially the final boss, are just so great and super memorable too. Like a lot of these boss battles are some of the most memorable parts of the game, just because the levels that you play through, that intensity gets amped up so much because now you're also dealing with something else at the same time.
We should also talk a little bit about the soundtrack, which I think is just also very great. It really sets kind of an ambiance for the world. It gives you this energy, which I think helps drive the platforming challenges. Because even straight up from the title screen, there's this rhythm, this energy to that soundtrack that kind of lingers throughout the entire play experience and pushes you to want to keep moving and kind of sets the groundwork for what will be Super Meat Boy.
Yeah, and also the soundtrack just slaps. Like, it's just, like, really, really, really good. It's one of the better video game soundtracks I can think of, and it sucks because I don't know about any other new consoles, but I have gotten this game on the Switch, which is, like, the only other console I ever got it on. And it was fun to play on Switch, but the soundtrack was switched to stock music on Switch. I don't know why that is. I don't know if they lost the rights to the music or something, even though it was made for the game. I have no idea. So maybe try to get it on PC, because it probably still has the soundtrack, but that soundtrack is so good. It adds so much to the game. And you're right, it's another way that encourages you to keep going quickly. This game is all about that. And it's even echoed in the sound.
Well, I think other than that, I would just say, as I mentioned at the top, this game has been incredibly influential, and you can see its influence across pretty much all of indie games. I mean, honestly, a lot of times Meat Boy even shows up as a guest character in most indie games. We have talked about Macmillan's games before when we talked about Binding of Isaac, and he's been such an influence on the industry. And this game, particularly, along with Braid, which I think we've talked about as well, really launched an entire subgenre of video games. now the divide between AAA and indie is greater than it's ever been, honestly. So that this kind of created a small revolution is interesting to see. And Macmillan continues to create really great games, as well as some other independent developers that came out of this same time frame around the 2010s in that Xbox Live Arcade summer that really kind of that launched a whole bunch of indie careers. And you look at this game, and it's complex, and it's like refinement of mechanic and that kind of arcadey feel, but the difficulty. You looked at things like Cuphead and a lot of other games that have really taken this idea and stretched it and allowed it to grow. And now Meat Boy, I think, after all these years, is getting some sort of a sequel, although it's kind of like an endless runner or something. But regardless, this has been a game that's like definitely gone down in history as one of the most impactful video games of all time, honestly.
Yeah, and I think we should wrap it up there.
Yeah, so I will start with my score. I've been giving a lot of them out lately, but this to me is just a perfect 10 game. I mean, honestly, it is such a refined, just straight up fun experience. Truly, it is. It's hard to find fault. There are, now I will say, and I think you mentioned this, but uh, while the difficulty cannot be, I don't think it's ever frustrating. I could see, honestly, I could see how it could frustrate some people, and I have heard that criticism once or twice before. I don't personally see it, and I think a lot of people could easily get into it. But if you are not a fan of an experience where you sometimes honestly kind of have to bang your head against a wall, then this might not be for you. But otherwise, it is just so much fun. And honestly, like, what are video games other than fun? As Reggie Fils-Aimé once said. I think that's paraphrased, but I definitely review it.
Way to bring it full circle right there. Yeah, yeah, I would give this game. Ah, hell, this is one of my favorite games. Like way up there. So I'll say 9.5 because I can think about some things in this game I don't like, but it's so tiny. 9.5. There you go. But yeah, this game's amazing. Like, and it also just, it's a game that I've loved to go back to and play again. Like, it's super replayable. And it's just super, super great. It was one of the first, like, it might have been the first like indie game that I super got into. But maybe not. But yeah, I really just, I think this game is just phenomenal. And yeah, great soundtrack too. Yes, I definitely recommend this game for sure. And it is on almost every platform. So, or I think it is anyway. I know it's on Switch with a shittier soundtrack, but it is on Steam and stuff. So it's pretty accessible. And yeah, I think we should move on to what you recommended to me last time.
It's on the Wii U.
Well, there you go. See? So look no further. Okay, Super Meat Boy is on the Wii U.
So speaking of mechanics-rich experiences, last time I recommended to you Rocket League. Rocket League is developed by Psyonix. It was actually, I don't know if many people know this, but it was actually a sequel to a game that they had developed for the PlayStation 3 called Supersonic Acrobatic Rocket-Powered Battle Cars. I think the new name is a little better.
I wonder why that one didn't catch on.
But essentially, Rocket League is car soccer. I mean, at its most basic, that's really all it is. It's now gone free to play. It released, I think, in like, you have it on the screen there. It released in 2015. And it became so widely popular because it was made freely available to PlayStation Plus subscribers at the time. And it blew up. Unlike the first one, which really didn't have much success at all, Rocket League has gone on to become honestly a phenomenon. It's become an esport. Now that it's gone free to play, it has more concurrent players than it's ever had, and it continues to just increase and rise and in viewer count and player count. So with that, I will hand it over to you to talk about Rocket League.
Yeah, so I've actually never played Rocket League before, although of course I've known about it. And 2015 surprises me because it feels more recent than that, but I don't know. I mean, I definitely have heard about this game for quite a long time, so it's not shocking. Um, yeah, so I never touched it because I really didn't think that I would like it, but I was wrong because this game is like super fun for what it is. And it's not much. It really isn't. There, like, as far as game modes go, there's not much. It is car. Steven is right. It is car soccer, and that's what you get. And you can play with different team sizes, but you're gonna play car soccer. That's what you're gonna do. And car soccer is really fun. But of course, that is a little bit reductive. The game is set up so that it's almost like these super powered cars that have boost energy. They can go super fast. They can leap up into the air and stuff, and they can drive up walls. So it's a little bit more than that, but at its fundamentals, it really is car soccer, and every game is gonna go pretty much the same way. You and the other team are going to drive around and hit the ball around and try to get into each other's goals, and there you go. That's it. And it's like, it seems so bare bones in a way where I would almost say like, oh man, that's just not enough. But this game does this so incredibly well. Like, it feels so great to play. The competition aspect is just like super invigorating. It is super well paced. It's like 5 minutes on the timer, and games never last super long. They last more than 5 minutes because that timer stops anytime you get a goal or whatever. But the games aren't super long, at least in quick play. I didn't play any competitive, and it does have a competitive mode, which I'm guessing is like a ranked mode. I didn't touch it, but yeah, it's like, it's just really, really, really fun. And it looks good. It has some nice flair to it. And yeah.
Yeah, and I will say the one thing about Rocket League is it is not easy to really learn the control. Like, okay, let me be clear. Fundamentally, the controls are very basic. You have a gas, you have a reverse, you kind of have like a power slide, you can jump or roll, and there's a boost. So grappling all of that is pretty straightforward. But then putting that into practice and hitting a soccer ball is not very easy. And it feels so good to play. Like, having those moments, those like interactions between you and the opponent and the soccer ball, even hitting the ball in this game, like the dopamine just from hitting the soccer ball feels so good. And then when you score a goal, oh my gosh, it's unbelievable. And then what's so great about Rocket League is the basics. As you are learning to grapple with the basics, you're getting better, and the game is structured in such a way where the skill ceiling is super high, but the skill floor is not so high where it's almost impossible to kind of enter play. Just like starting the game up and playing and having fun is very easy, but then if you want to kind of dive deeper and do really cool aerial tricks where you're hitting the ball midair, where you're like jumping off the ceiling and hitting the ball and doing all that kind of crazy stuff, that's there for you too. And all of that feels really good and really rewarding.
Yeah, and just to comment on the skill floor, skill ceiling thing, I came into this game as a newcomer, and I've been kicking ass, okay? Like, I literally have not lost a single game that I played. Now, I haven't played enough to the point where, like, that's super impressive. It's not like I'm 100-0 or something, but like, but I didn't lose a game. I scored a lot of goals, and I was just barely learning the game. I wasn't doing any crazy tricks. I didn't have to like master defense strategy and stuff, and maybe I just got lucky and all my opponents were just terrible or something, which I guess is possible. But like, I will say, like, I didn't feel like I was getting completely left behind, where I like opened this game up and was just like, God, there's so much I have to figure out. It just felt like it was super fun to do what I was doing, and every time I did something a little bit different, I was like, wow, I would love to, like, I wonder if I could make that work better next time. Like even something as simple as like driving up a wall and jumping off it and hitting the ball just to get it away from the wall or something like that. It makes you think like, wow, I could score a goal doing that. And it just something that I never like when I'm getting into a game, and something that will make me stop playing immediately, is whenever I enter a game and my first thought is I have way too much to learn and I don't care. And it's really easy for me to feel that way with a lot of games. And it was what I was worried about with this game because of how fast paced it was, and I assumed everyone's super sweaty, which they probably are in competitive. So I thought there was like no way. But I really don't think it is like that. I think that if all you know how to do is boost and jump, you can still like do stuff in quick play mode at least. And it feels good. It feels good to play. You don't feel like you're missing out on too much. So like, yeah, Lane, if you wanna become a Twitch streamer who streams Rocket League professionally, like, yeah, you're gonna have to learn it. But for a casual player like me, like, it's also super great.
And it's one of those things where I would say credit to the matchmaking of Rocket League. And I'll say just from personal experience, I've played matches where I've played with much better players on my team, and the matchmaking is structured in such a way. And what's so great about having a ranking that you can visibly see in the match is oftentimes it will make sure to match you with the exact same criteria. So, for instance, say I, as a gold level player in competitive, am playing with someone who's diamond, the matchmaking will find that exact same combination on the opposing team. And that's wild to me. And also, just in general, like the matchmaking of casual with your kind of hidden MMR, which is kind of your like hidden rating, and even in competitive with your MMR there. It's so good. And that's what's so surprising to me. And what makes Rocket League so fun is that, like, that climb to get better is structured in such a way where it's never burdensome. Like if you think about something like a League of Legends or a game where like the mechanics are so super refined, where you have to know like all these different things and you have to understand positioning and all this stuff. I mean, no, at its basic, Rocket League is just car soccer. So even if you're playing with people who are much, much better than you, sure, you probably will lose. But if you understand that you just have to kind of drive and make sure you hit the ball and those sorts of things, you're still going to do very well. And so climbing up to that point where you're doing crazy aerials and all that stuff, matchmaking is so good that it kind of like builds you to that, which I really credit it for, because I think you're the same way, where it's like I go into COD or Warzone or something like that. Matchmaking is not that way. You will get into lobbies where people are super sweaty and you just get dominated. And that's not really fun. And it's hard to kind of like, you know, get yourself to the point where you want to get better, because oftentimes you're just getting absolutely dominated and crushed. With Rocket League, it's like I never felt that, which is surprising to me, because I was the same way when I came into Rocket League, which I played a little bit in the past, but I've played a ton since it went free. I was expecting to jump into a game and just get absolutely dominated. Like I'd be like, I don't even know what's going on or what I'm doing. But no, it's like you score, you kind of position yourself well. The matchmaking is very good. You score a couple of goals and you're like, no, I got this. And that is really what I feel like why Rocket League took off as much as it did.
Yeah. So all of that aside, my complaints are really minor here, actually. I feel like, so when it comes to the controls, the only element of the controls that I'll change my mind on it, but I'm not crazy about it, is reversing, which seems like a little thing, but I mean, your moveset isn't huge, so it is something. Reversing feels a little bit clunky to me, and it works very much like you're reversing a car, where your controls reverse as well, which in most racing games would be fine, but in this one, it's like you really, really, really want to get right back into it, so it can be awkward when I have to like readjust every time I start reversing, like, oh shit. So I don't know, would it be better if they did it the other way? I'm not even sure, but I'm not crazy about that. And the only other thing is like sound-wise, like presentation-wise, like the game definitely looks good. And like the effects for scoring a goal and stuff like that are huge. They make you feel really good, and that's great. But like, it is super G fuel, if you will, like it's got all these like neon colors and stuff, but it's not really particularly stylish. So maybe, I don't know, maybe something, there could have been a little bit more there. And also, when it came to the music, it was just playing these really bad pop tunes and then like telling me to listen to them on Spotify, and I found that kind of weird. But so I don't know if it has like if it has an actual score, but it doesn't sound like it does. Um, yeah, and that's all pretty minor. But again, there's not a ton to this game in terms of like game modes or like story modes or anything. There's nothing like that. There's like a training mode, and then there's like different team sizes and some party modes. Like so, so I figured it was worth noting. But like aside from that, like it really is just like so fun, and it's a game I'm gonna keep playing without a doubt, because it's simple, it's easy to understand, and it's still satisfying. Like so whatever small complaints I do have are really tiny, and generally the game just controls phenomenally. So yeah.
I will agree with you on some aspects of the presentation, but I will say on the flip side of that, I do think like the car designs and the car effects, not necessarily the sound so much because you can get like different car engines and all of that. None of that really sounds super great, but like the sound of hitting the ball and scoring a goal and all that presentation is really great. And I will say, in addition to that, I feel like Rocket League has incredible cosmetics. One thing about Rocket League that I think has always been true and is now continued to be true as it kind of transitioned to a battle pass is the unlock cosmetics are super fun and really do enhance the experience because they're just so wacky and so wild. And if you want to have a car that looks really like true to life and very refined, you can do that. If you want to have a car that's just absolutely bonkers, like one of them is like this little Mars rover lander, and you could put a Ghostbuster Stay Puft Marshmallow Man on top and all this wild stuff. And then there's like goal effects. So when you score a goal, something can happen. One's like a ghost comes out and then it dabs. That stuff I actually find super charming. Typically, I would say that's garbage. Like, I don't like the way Fortnite structures some of that stuff or Warzone. All that's like takes me out of the experience. But with Rocket League, because it is like this just car soccer zaniness, all of that I feel like really enhances the experience and makes you want to keep playing more to unlock that stuff. And what's great is like none of it's necessarily behind a paywall. Now, you can pay into the battle pass. There is stuff that you have to pay into the battle pass to unlock. But if you're just playing for free, I mean, you'll generally unlock cosmetics. There's like loot crates where you can unlock stuff, but you don't pay for any of that. So it's just really fun to keep playing, and it kind of pushes you to keep playing. And then the other thing I wanted to mention, you mentioned that there aren't many other modes. That is true, but I will say the party modes, besides there being kind of like a Mario Kart style mode where you have power ups, which is actually pretty fun. Like there's one where it's like a punching glove shoots out of your car and hits the soccer ball. There are some, I wouldn't call them necessarily competitive modes, but more competitive modes. One is hockey, which hockey with cars is absolutely hilarious. And the other is basketball, which is pretty fun. That one's all about hitting the ball while it's in midair, basically.
Yeah, I will say I didn't play enough of the game or the other modes at all to speak on them. I don't want to let that influence my opinion of the game overall because I didn't even try them. I just noticed that there weren't a lot, but it is like. Yeah, it's like the kind of thing that you need like an AI mode. You need like a story mode. I mean, like who cares? Like what they have is really good, so it's like whatever. Um,
Oh, the one other thing I wanted to mention, because I feel like this is important for a game like this, the training mode in Rocket League is really good. A lot of different training mode rules. It reminds me of kind of like a fighting game, honestly, with the amount of setup that you can kind of put into the actual training mode. So if you want to get really good and want to kind of grind out hours in training mode, practicing shots and all that stuff, all of that is there for you to be able to do that, which I think is just another good part of the experience.
and I don't know that there's much else to say. If it's cool if we wrap it up.
Yeah, let's do it.
Great. Yeah. So, look, I really like what I played of this game. I'm gonna play more of it. I think it's super fun. I think it's really well made. It's super robust. The controls are great, and it's really satisfying to play the game. Um, I have very little complaints. Um, I will go with an 8.5 for now. Um, but as I get more value out of this game, I could see it even growing on me because it was a ton of fun when I played, and it made me want to come back. So, you know, it gets big points for that. And would I recommend the game? I mean, it's free to play now. Yeah, I mean, I picked it up and I had a great time. Like, even in my first like 10 minutes of playing the game, I was having a great time. So, like, yeah, sure. I mean, if you're willing to download the Epic Games launcher, which I know that might be a turnoff, but yeah.
And I echo that. I think it's just a super fun, mechanic rich experience. Pretty much like right when you take the controller, it's just fun from the get go. As I mentioned already, like the dopamine of just hitting the ball and scoring goals and all that is really great. And when you get those epic shots or like a really great assist or something, it just feels really good. And I think I'd score it a 9. I just really enjoy it. I do think we kind of alluded to it, but my one complaint would probably be that like there aren't many modes. However, honestly, like I could put in just hundreds of hours into just straight up car soccer. So I don't know if you really need to add more modes because there are the other modes that there are, I have played and I've played quite a bit and I like them okay, but ultimately like it's all about the car soccer truly. And I would definitely recommend it. As you mentioned, it's free. So, you know, pick it up, try it out. Oh, one thing that we didn't mention actually that I wanted to touch on really quickly was Rocket League was actually one of the first games that really pushed the whole cross-platform idea. I think technically Minecraft was the actual first, but if Rocket League wasn't the first, it was really close behind. And so if you pick up Rocket League on pretty much any platform now, you can play it cross-platform. If you were one of the lucky ones to pick it up on Steam, you can still play it on Steam, although now it's no longer available on Steam. But you can play with your friends on Xbox or PlayStation, cross-platform with PC and vice versa. So all of that just really enhances the experience as well. But yeah, I definitely recommend it.
Okay, so we'll move on to what what I'm going to recommend to you, Stephen. And we'll get into the recommendations. So, for next time, I am recommending George Harrison's album "All Things Must Pass." "All Things Must Pass" was George Harrison's solo debut apart from the Beatles. He did release 2 albums while he was with them, but they basically don't count. So for all intents and purposes, it's his debut solo album. Of course, you know, George Harrison of the Beatles. It's kind of goes without saying. It was a double album, marketed as a triple album, although it isn't really. But yeah, we will talk about that next time. And what do you have for me?
Okay, so Don, I'm going to recommend you something that I haven't thought about in a long time. But I'm going to recommend you an album, Lounge Against the Machine. This is, I believe, the first studio album, at least, by Richard Cheese. Richard Cheese does essentially like jazz slash swing slash big band parodies of popular pop songs. And unlike, I think we talked about Weird Al before, they're not lyrical parodies. They're just, I don't know how you would describe it, but literally just taking the song and kind of creating big band, but not doing it in such a way where it's like an homage. It's definitely like a satire or a parody. So with that, next time we will talk about Lounge Against the Machine.
Great, and that does it for this week's episode. As always, you can check us out on Castbox if you were here on YouTube, and if you come from Castbox, you can go to Casting 404 on YouTube and find our podcast there. We stream live when we do these, so you can hop in the chat. Yeah, is there anything else to add there?
No, just once again, I want to thank everybody for listening. I know that this one and a couple of the previous ones this year, we've definitely missed our 2 weeks. So apologies on that. as you know, 2020 has been crazy for everybody. So just bear with us. We're trying to get them out on time as much as we can. So with that, we're trying to be back within 2 weeks, where we will talk about what we recommended today.
All right, great. Well, with that, those were our thoughts. Those were our recommendations. Get wrecked.